the second Community Services meeting of the cycle, and a special welcome, where's he sitting? Oh, he's hiding, the Housing Officer in Hamilton, because you're due to be retiring at the end of this month, so this will very likely be your last appearance before members of this committee anyway. As far as I'm concerned, you've done sterling work in a very taxing position, and well, I guess it's more than a decade now. You know all the ins and outs of housing legislation. You know when to be tough, and surprisingly to some, you've also shown your tender side when necessary, and these are key qualities in a key position as far as I'm concerned. So on behalf of everybody here, I'm going to wish you well in whatever you decide to do next, whether it's work or play. Thank you, Ian.
Chairman, can I just add to that, as a
former chairman of committee,
former chairman of the committee, I always found Ian to be totally objective and impartial, and that in somebody in that position is such a rare characteristic, and I too wish him all the very, very best for his future. And I'm hoping he'll have a good retirement, if that is what it will be.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bennett.
Just explain, I'm not going to retire. I might be taking my pensions, but I'm not retiring.
Well, we'll see. Anyway, look, let's get down to the business on the agenda. Can I ask now if there are any declarations of interest? Councillor Bennett.
Chairman, I'm a member of the shadow governing body of Royal Cornwall Hospitals Trust.
Right, okay. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Billsborough.
Yes, my daughter is a staff nurse at the hospital, so if anything comes up on that, I'll declare an interest.
Thank you very much, Councillor Billsborough. Anything else? No, okay. Item 2, minutes. The draft minutes from the meeting held on July the 7th are in front of you. Are they a correct record? Are there any omissions or corrections that need to be made? Councillor Bennett.
Chairman, CS 16/15, again, the declaration of my interest is wrongly recorded. I'm a board member of the shadow governing body.
And what page is this on?
It's on page 1.
Yes, I've got it, at the bottom of the page. And it should read?
A member of the shadow governing body.
The shadow governing body. Right. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay, can I have a proposer then, if there's no one else? Thank you, Councillor Martin. Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Sims. Nearly. Right, okay. Urgent items. There are none as far as I'm concerned, except to say that I was going to apologise on behalf of the senior manager because one or two of today's reports didn't arrive on time, and certainly I've been having issues with the council server for the last week or so, and I do believe that hasn't helped. But hopefully you've all had sufficient time to peruse the contents by now. Okay, let's go on to part 1, reports requiring a decision. Item 4, review actions from the July meeting. That's you, Joel, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. There was very little discussed at the last meeting that doesn't feature in some way, shape or form on the agenda for today's meeting, so quite a bit of it is carried forward. The new service plan was discussed in detail at the last meeting, and a review on that is here this morning. The local account has been redesigned. That was brought to the last meeting and is again part 2 item today. And also the same goes for the housing update. So I think a lot's carried forward, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Joel. So just the 2 pages. Any questions? Okay, can I have a proposer that members note the recommendations and the requests from the last meeting and note that they've been implemented? Thank you, Councillor Mumford. Seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favour? Anyone against? Right, that's dealt with, thank you. We now move on to item 5, budget monitoring. Okay, Just to say that this report gives us the figures up to the end of August, where there are variances of more than £5,000. So in other words, not every budget is listed here. And we've also attached to those tables helpful notes explaining the issues involved. I'll stop there and Ben, you can take over.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. As the Chairman has noted, that the paper before you presents our budget monitoring on an exceptions basis with all amounts over £5,000 highlighted. Just repeat that cost centres where there are less than 5,000 variances have not been included in this. Following member comments at previous committees, not of this present committee, the report has been expanded to include a greater amount of narrative to aid you in understanding the movements in the respective centres. I repeat what I've said in previous committees. We are on a journey with this. We are undergoing an overhaul of our budgeting system with a process to provide a look at the 15-16 budgets to improve our accuracy and the connectivity between the budgets. This process also looks towards the 16-17 council budgeting process and our medium-term financial planning over the next 5 years. We are gearing up our process in the finance team with budget holders, and as members you will have the opportunity for a workshop on around the 1st of December to look at medium-term financial planning and our budgeting as a whole. The report sets out the details. We have some kind of cumulative over and underspends. In part, these are due to timing differences. Some of them are due to profiled differences where we've profiled the budget over 12 months and perhaps income is due in under month 1 or month 4. So there are some variances due to this. But I'll probably stop there and actually let you ask any questions if you so wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Councillor Billsborough.
Yes, Chairman, on page 8, item 2.6, it mentions that the Park House budget is overspent so far by £165,000. That in itself is serious. What is going to happen? Is it going to rise or fall, or what are we going to do about it? In other words, we can't leave it like that.
No, Councillor, that is indeed correct. Sorry. We are reviewing it. We are looking at the use of staffing over the site and all the process around that. I can't say a great deal more at this stage, but we are spending a lot of time looking at this area.
Okay, Chairman, I'll accept that, but I do feel that this is cause for concern.
I wouldn't disagree with you, Councillor Billsborough. There are some real issues with regard to the cost of running Park House, but I don't think it's any criticism of the staff, and I don't think it's any criticism of the management, because, let's face it, it got a good rating only 2 or 3 months ago, perhaps 3 months ago now. But the thing is, we are no longer talking here about a simple residential home. In effect, with all the dementia patients that we've got there, we've got a care home, so the costs of actually running Park House are spiralling.
I mean, this is...
I think Aisling can take this on because there's a reference in item 7.
A risk that we have been advising members of for some time, that the cost of caring for older people is actually sitting outside budgeted provision. So the issues in Park House are that people are requiring much more care than ever before, and for the last 5 years we've seen exponential growth, I think by about 100,000 each year that we're subsidising the care home, and that has been a member decision to do that because we feel we want to give people the choice to end their days on the Isles of Scilly. But people are now requiring 2-to-1 provision, and certainly the fees that we're charging don't reflect that. So there's a big piece of work we need to do, and we need to make a decision about what we are going to start charging residents to meet some of these costs. But we are going to have to accept that in the current setup, there is a high level of subsidy, which is why we are looking at alternative ways of providing this service to see if we can achieve greater economies of scale. But recruitment is always an issue, as you know, and we can't stop the service because we don't have the staff. So we get agency staff, and that costs lots of money too. So yes, it is a concern, and we'll keep you abreast of developments, but there aren't options here. The only way to stop overspending on Park House is to cease the service currently, and that's not something I have had any indication that people want to do.
Yes, sir. I'm not doubting the care at Park House. All I'm worried about is this 165,000, is it going to go up or down? You know, it's not an easy question to answer, but we're only in October now, and there's another 6 months to go. But I'll leave it at that.
I think it will go up. We don't see how we can bring that down. That will go up. It won't. I hope it won't be at the same proportion, but it will go up, and we're having to look at then budget lines in other areas of this overall budget to subsidise it. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're totally underspending in adult social care strategy. Gareth and I are minimising going to any meetings, because this is the priority for our service, is to make sure that Park House can run effectively.
On that subject too, are the agency staff mostly being recruited in the area of specialist dementia services?
Yes, we use specialist recruitment agencies, and they're very good.
And expensive. Yeah.
And expensive, absolutely.
The question I was actually going to ask was on 2.4 on page 8 and furtherly on page 10. The earmarked grant of 75,000, the transfer hasn't yet taken place. Who is responsible for that to make sure it happens?
Coming in for the skills funding agency,
yes.
yeah.
But
Thank you, Councillor. That would normally be initiated between the budget holder and then the accountancy team. So it's at the request of the budget holder for that then to be transferred.
you have, correct. You have required it to be transferred.
It hasn't yet, as I understand it, but once that request is made, we will then transfer those monies across. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Sort of transfers don't always come in at the beginning of the financial year. I mean, the skills funding agency is notoriously slow in actually.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come into that one in terms of, I mean, that's one area where we can, as a budgeting team, look at the profiling of that, because if it's only really a cash flow issue, but if we know when that money is going to be transferred, we can then, in the budget monitoring, actually profile that accordingly. So at the moment there's a variance showing because we've accounted for it at the start of year. If in reality we're not going to do that at the end of year, we might as well actually not put that in the profile until that point. So there's a bit of work that we are doing as well as a team.
Ben, you did mention that, well, you talked about the inconsistencies in the coding and so forth, and that process. And you're talking about having it sorted by the end of the year. That's Christmas, is it? I mean, can members be assured that will have been sorted out by December?
Yes, Chairman. We are, over the next couple of weeks, we are having budget holder meetings with all the senior and kind of middle level budget holders to inform us for decision making for 16-17. That includes looking at the coding. We have a lot of challenges from the previous year's budget setting, current year's budget setting, and a lot of that actually occurred with the move of committees, with the new committees being set up. So there's some overhang from that still, and that will be corrected as part of that process.
So are we only doing it for 16-17, or will we have it clarified for 15-16?
My aim is to clarify for 15-16 as well. I think there is a need to in reviewing these budgets.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Chairman. Two follow-up questions on that. When agency staff are employed, where do they live?
We have all sorts of ways of doing that. So obviously it would be normal accommodation in the private sector, or sometimes they will stay with members of staff. We've got all sorts of ways of making that work. It has to be creative.
Okay, thank you. And turning to page 14, it says the home care team has an underspend. Is that because we haven't employed somebody? Is that because nobody's been employed who should be?
No, it just reflects the actual cost of delivering the service. So it reflects what the demand has been for home care to date, and so that's underspent at the moment.
But we haven't got a...
But we haven't
This is-
done a full year, and
Sorry, members, this is page 20 of the report, or page
14.
20 of your documentation,
Oh,
page-
or 14
Okay.
of the finance.
yeah, I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't, this usually, because this is obviously to the end of the year, but normally this will spike over the winter months. We're normally underspent at this point in the financial year because there isn't as much need in the summer. It's just how that works.
Have we got home care workers?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, that's our community provision that is operated from Park House. Yes, we do. And we deliver packages of care to the community
Right.
as required. Yes.
So there's no...
Had it for years. There's no other provider.
No, I know that. I haven't been able to find out anything about home care. So I assumed there was no worker.
It's the same as dom care and provision in the community.
Can you put your light on?
Sorry, it's known as dom care as well. We have been providing it for years.
In people's own homes?
Yeah.
On the off islands?
And we've been trying to recruit home care workers on the off islands.
Ah.
Yeah. But we have got them on St Mary's. So at the moment, if somebody on an off island needs a care package, it's delivered by a St Mary's team going over. And we are delivering to everybody that requires it.
And that, of course, is quite expensive.
Yes, although there is an underspend on that budget.
Currently, we haven't hit winter yet, and it's going to be a really cold winter according to most long forecasts. So I'm not touching that budget at the moment.
Yes, that's right. The Buick Sprons and the Daily Express, both are insisting that it's going to be a very cold winter. Councillor Bennett.
Yes, another small point. Page 19, the final sentence. Premises costs are overspent mainly due to housekeeping and cleaning product purchases, as well as wheelchairs. I would imagine cleaning products and housekeeping are things which are fairly static from year to year, you know, just the inflationary increase. Why the difference?
No, the kind of products that you use in care homes, you know, the kind of sanitary kind of wipes and everything, use of those has increased because of the level of need in the home.
Sorry,
The use of cleaning products has increased because of the level of need in the home. There is a far greater need for cleaning products and wipes and washing powder, etc., etc. I mean, you're all
So
very
it's
welcome to come and have a
unforeseen
look around
increase.
Park House and actually see what it's like that at the moment. It's kind of, there's a huge amount of stuff that's needed to keep that home clean
yes, I'm sure.
and the clients.
I'm sure there is, but I can't understand how you haven't had a vast increase in the number of residents.
We've had a vast increase in the level of need. I have to be
Okay.
really careful how I talk about this because obviously there are very few people that live there, so I kind of get really nervous when I'm talking about it. But I'm really happy to have a kind of, you know, a conversation about this in a different fora, and it's not because I want to keep the public out, but I want to protect the dignity of people who live in Park
Of
House.
course,
If that's all
yes.
right, thank you.
But for future years, you'd be able to estimate more
Well, we want
accurately.
absolutely, and I think the great thing about we've got Ben now, we've got capacity now in finance to do a big deep dive into the actual real costs of Park House and understanding where we can make efficiency savings. But I'm, you know, again, I want to be really careful about how we talk about that because it's the last thing I think any of you want to see cuts in. But we just want to really understand why it costs what it costs, and do fees and charges reflect the true cost of providing care there, and therefore what are we going to do in order in passing that cost on to the customer.
Thank you.
It's going to be difficult, but I think that will be the next committee.
Right, are there any other questions? Okay. There's a recommendation on page 7. Can I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Martin. Seconded by Councillor Bennett. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. We're now on to item 6, performance against service plan. Can I say just put one or two things? Yeah. Okay. Will you be taking this or Joel? Joel's taking it, okay. What I was going to say was that last year we had a service improvement plan, and that was basically developed to keep the show on the road during the reshaping process. This financial year, and we agreed this at the July meeting, we now have a service development plan, and it's got all those traffic light and RAG ratings, as they're called, and you'll note there are no red lights, and 1/3 of the lights since July have actually turned green. What we've also done at the back is that where we've listed the initials and where we've had the acronyms, we've actually given you the names so you can actually interpret who does what and what those strange series of initials are. I mean, ideally, I don't know what you think, Joel, it'd probably be best to deal with adult social care first, then health and well-being, then healthy living, and then lifelong learning, and then after you've dealt with one section, then people might have questions on that. Otherwise, it's quite a long, convoluted process. Anyway, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. As you said, we've now got some extra sections at the back that hopefully demystify some of the initials in there. I'd also say the RAG rating can be subjective, so I think all officers would be open to challenge on that. Sometimes, depending how optimistic or pessimistic we are at the time, things turn either green or amber. Some of the reason things aren't red is because we haven't actually scheduled them to take place yet. So it's not as if we've made progress on actions, it's just we hadn't actually built that into our time frame yet as well. I was just going to select some of the highlight areas. Again, members may wish to highlight other particular areas. There's been good steps forward taken with adult safeguarding training, and I think members have probably had the opportunity to attend that. That's also been extended to staff and other members in the community. Adult social care is spending a lot of time this week working on the newly commissioned database, and that's in partnership with Children's Services, so it will assist with the case management work they're doing. That's taken up, that's I think where they are sat as we speak. The next item on the agenda looks at the development of the integration between health and social care. So again, that's alluded to in the report, but perhaps might be discussed in more detail in a moment or two. Domestic abuse was linked into our plan, and there's been some activity around that, looking to commission some additional services. Some training has been delivered, and we have another workshop on Monday morning with colleagues from Cornwall to talk to us about the MARAC process and how we can make more effective referrals. There's been a 7% increase in some of the active silly footfall, which is pleasing to see. I know in the budget figures there's also some income anomalies which we need to address, but there's been some good work taking place with children, young people and the wider community across the sports hall, gym and other sports facilities. And we've been number crunching, and there have been 480 participants in our adult learning activities over the past 12 months. And that's been made up of 50 activities, again ranging from some of the recreational, like we had a watercolour painting session yesterday that had 12 learners in it, and also going through to things like the Zumba, which attracted 60 people back in March time. And there's developments on that which hopefully we'll be able to report to the next committee. So that's just a real snapshot, but members may wish to highlight other areas within the plan as well.
Right, any questions? Councillor Bennett.
Can I just ask if the 480 are actually different people?
Yes, I think they are 480 individual learners. As I said, that number could have been inflated by the number of people who did Zumba, which was a sort of one-off activity back in March time where we had 60 or 70 people. So we're conscious that number could drop when we talk in 12 months' time. But I think it's individual learners, that figure.
Anyone else?
Yes, Chairman.
Councillor Daly, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. There's two things that worry me, so perhaps you can help with them. One is this question of home help worker for the off islands. I don't seem to see anywhere that people can see that they can get a home care work done. And I'm disturbed by the fact that we haven't seemed to have someone able to do it on the off islands, except coming from St Mary's. I'm not against people coming from St Mary's to do it, but we don't seem to even have that. So if you want to deal with them one at a time, that's number one of two.
Okay, in terms of home care or dom care or community provision, that is delivered to everybody with an assessed need. So if they've come to adult social care with assessed level of needs and need support in their home, they will get it, regardless of their location. And if that means going by boat to off-islands, that is what happens. We have also tried to recruit people resident on each off-island to do that, to sit on our bank staff, so they're fully trained and ready to spring into action as packages arrive. There's an ongoing advert on all the off-islands, but I think we've only had interest on St Agnes, and we haven't on St Martin's as yet. I cannot do much else other than encourage people to apply. It's a very rewarding role. It's hard work, but I think anyone who works in that sector from Park House would tell you the rewards that you get from that job. But there's not much else I can do. I could ask you members to kind of see if you'd encourage people to apply, but that's about the limit I can do in terms of recruitment. I think sometimes, Colin, what you're talking about also is kind of the softer stuff around home care, which is a statutory piece of provision. You keep kind of sort of mentioning home health, which is a kind of different service that doesn't exist now as a statutory bit of provision. So what we've done there is recruit an active living coordinator to try and recruit volunteers to support people in their home to do low-level tasks, like come around, have a cup of tea, maybe do a bit of light hoovering, take you out for the day. And there's going to be an event in the library shortly where Elaine Liza from Age UK is going to try and recruit some volunteers, because now she's got a much clearer picture now of the level of need in the community. And I know that she and Gareth have gone to St Martin's and talked to the community about what support might be appropriate for St Martin's. And they're happy to keep on doing that. So they have had feedback from, and I know that was facilitated. I think maybe you were there, but definitely Councillor Saville was.
Yes. I just don't, if someone feels they need some help at home, I don't understand how they're going to ask for it.
They go to see adult social care like you do in every community in the country.
But how do you do that?
You ring them up.
There is a number available, and people know that number?
Yes, and I'm sure we put it on most of our publications.
Okay.
There is a number available. I mean, it's highly unlikely that people who need support in their home are unknown to professionals already. So there will be referral from a GP. They'll be known to the team. So yes, people who have an assessed need for help in the home will get it, and they do. And they get it at a far higher standard than anywhere else in the country. We don't do 15-minute visits here. Yeah.
My second question...
Could I just point out,
yes.
The person on St Agnes, I mean, a certain amount of training is involved, my understanding, and we're hoping the person will start this winter. But she's already done some work in Park House and had a look, and done some sessions there. So it's quite a formal process and quite an, it will be, if it works, it will be quite,
I think we've been quite innovative. We've done this, we've addressed this, but it's basically recruiting those people. But yes, Chairman's absolutely right. She's got to do all the common induction standards, because that's got to be safe. Somebody who's remote from, Park House has to know absolutely everything and keep up to date. So I would just encourage your fellow residents to apply for those roles, Colin. That's all I can say.
Councillor Daly and then Councillor Mumford.
The second was concerning the question of land transport on the off-islands. Now, I have asked before for a central register of people who would be willing to take people to the quay, for instance, or to an event on an off-island that they could ring, rather like we ring the buzzer bus. I haven't seen any progress in that.
I mean, as I said, AGK are trying to assemble a list of volunteers, and they'll do it based on the needs that are expressed by the community. Not to sound in any way cheeky, I think you should do that, Colin. I think that's absolutely something a member could do in their own community, is to get together a list of people who are happy to give each other lifts.
I don't think that would work. I think it needs to come from the centre.
I mean, just again, to give you an example from Agnes, we do actually have 2 mobility vehicles which the community has acquired and which are available not just to local people, but also to visitors who need them. And that's a community initiative which we put together. Councillor Mumford?
Yes, I'd just like to say that I'm glad to see all the children's activities during the holidays are continuing. And I think we've sorted out a problem where some off-islanders had a sort of gap between lunchtime, and I think that's been sorted out, hasn't it, Joel?
It has. I deliberately didn't put any references to children in this
Yes.
report. I got my knuckles rapped last time for
quite
it being
right.
too child-friendly. So I made
Well-
a conscious decision this time to keep it much more adult-focused, but you're
They
absolutely
are part
right.
of the community, I think, aren't they?
Indeed.
Yes, there is one
also-
action in there that I noticed. Action 8 is sneaked in.
Yes, also that I would like to say, I did say this in the children's meeting, that the autism training was very good. And also, I'm glad to see a lot of adult training going on, especially with the mental health and various things.
Thank you, Councillor Mumford. If there are no more questions, can I ask for a proposer for the recommendation on page 3, please? Councillor Bennett proposed, Councillor Martin seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. That's item 6 dealt with. Item 7, which is a health and social care update and a pretty far-reaching report. You're going to take it in Gareth's absence.
Yeah.
I think the reason why action is being taken is spelled out pretty starkly. It could produce, from my position, a pioneering example of these islands, on these islands of health and social care integration, but there will be definitely plenty of bridges to cross and questions to ask on the way. I won't go into my little quibbles about a couple of spelling mistakes on the first page. People will have noticed them, I expect, as well.
So you're not
I rather
going
like
to-
the idea of an exciting hospital site. I won't mention the other one.
So thank you for not mentioning the typos. So, I mean, I think everybody around this table has been part of this idea for quite a long time, and I think it's kind of been various versions of it. And I think before I even started at the council, there was talk about putting some dementia beds up at the hospital, maybe 4. So it's not completely brand new, but suddenly sort of the stars are aligned and things are really picking up pace. We've had some fantastic support from the strategic development team, and NHS Estates have suddenly got really engaged, who own the hospital site. Now, as you know from earlier reports, we have got issues around the cost of Park House, but more importantly, we've got issues around the actual facility. It's not appropriate, and we all know that. Got limited outside space. I think there's been fantastic investment to make the most of what we've got, like putting in a lift and a roof garden and the gate so that people can sit outside, but it's not appropriate, and it's certainly not going to produce the best possible outcomes for people with dementia. And in fact, that kind of environment is actually going to make dementia worse. So in terms of producing the best possible outcomes for clients and potentially making some kind of efficiency savings, a hybrid facility at the hospital would be really good. So we've had people come over from NHS Estates and from Kerno CCG to look around the site, and there is quite good potential there to develop it. Obviously, that will go through all the necessary planning processes and consultation with the community. I think the next step is now that we kind of got the right people around the table, is to start number crunching. So we're going to have to set up a project board and set up a few work areas of work. One's going to be around how many beds do we need here? What's that going to look like in terms of a business plan? How, if we have a single provider running that, will you recharge the various bits of care that are provided there? And there are complications, aren't there? Because health is provided free at the point of care, whereas adult social care is means tested. So we'll have to work that out. But what we're thinking is, let's not let all those governance and financial issues stop the idea. So let's commit to the idea and then try and work through all those kind of obstacles. But it's looking quite positive. My belief is that we try and let the NHS run this as a project, let NHS Estates be the lead on this because they're experienced at creating these facilities. We've got the team leader at St Mary's Hospital is going to go to a similar facility in the Channel Islands where they actually are providing nursing, dementia care and hospital provision on one site. So she's going to come back about how that works in practice. So, I mean, really, the report tells you what's going on. All I wanted to voice, really, was that I do feel quite positive about this maybe coming to pass now. And will make a significant difference. And then, obviously, then there's the issue about what do we do with Park House as a current asset, which is quite useful to us as a community.
Yes, I mean, all I'd add to what you said is that the size of Park House is an issue. It is restricted in the number of people it can have, and as it says in the report, the number of adults living over the age of 80 is forecast to double in the next 25 years. And the fact remains, I've got to be careful what I say here, but you know, the average life expectancy on Scilly already is over 80. We have one of the highest life expectancies anywhere in the country. So the pressure of space on Park House is considerable. It isn't going to be a permanent solution, much as some people would like it to be. It's part of the island's heritage. It's done yeoman service. It's working very well at the moment. But in the foreseeable future and the close foreseeable future, it can't last, unfortunately. Councillor Pillsbury.
Yes, yes, Chairman. The only comment I have is I would not wish to raise people's hopes. I agree with all that Aisling said, but when you look on page 3, paragraph 5.1, about the financing, with all due respect, it sounds rather vague. The hospital site costs incurred by the NHS will be recouped through a site rental agreement over the agreed term to either the council or commission provider. What does that mean? And what's it worth in terms of hard cash?
Well, we don't know yet, but all I will say is if you look at what we're currently spending at the moment for our statutory duties in residential care, I would be amazed if it was any more expensive to deliver it this way. And in fact, I would hope to see a reduction in those costs. Don't forget, we are subsidising residential care as a council, which no other council does. They expect the cost of residential care to be come back entirely through the client's contributions. And obviously, they will support people if they can't be self-funders. So I think that level of subsidy, we would hope, would reduce. I'm not trying to get people's hopes up, but I am trying to get some enthusiasm around this project, because I think that's what we're going to need to make it work, is community enthusiasm.
Yes, well, of course it will need a large amount of capital to get this, and it will obviously, we can't provide it. So I'll ask the question I always ask, what are the chances of getting it out of the government, especially in view of their trying to close their deficit?
I know, but I think if we are trying to show efficiencies over a period of time and trying to show that this actually will save money to the NHS and the social care system in the long term, this is about an investor-save project. It ties very much into the whole deal for Cornwall thinking, but we're just slightly ahead of the curve. It's about managing the public estate better to get maximum outcomes for clients. So I don't want to say what the chances are, but we've got the right people around us. We've got the MP is very positive, NHS estates are very positive. So I don't know, but I feel positive about it. I know I always get overexcited about things, but I think I'd rather be than not.
And finally, Chairman, on page 2, 3.5, it says the Health Overview Scrutiny Committee have been made aware of this. I know we had the paper pushed into myself and the officers. I decided it was too premature to go before HOSC. So I took that decision. Until we have more information, all we could do is talk about it.
Chairman, you're absolutely right. And I did hesitate to bring this paper, actually, because it is just more talking about it. But it's only because there's going to be, I think we're going to set up the project board quite soon. So I just want to say that this is really firmly on track now. And you're right, I don't think this is ready for scrutiny because we're not yet actually presenting concrete proposals for service redesign.
Sorry, Councillor Martin next, and then Councillor Daly. I was just going to say, but this is what the government wants us to do. It wants health and social care integration. And if we can make it work here, they will be very pleased. We may be exactly the sort of project that they will be wanting to encourage. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, I just want to say we need to support our officers on this one because apart from it's part of the evolution of a community, isn't it? If we think over, you mentioned heritage. Well, if you go back to the days of the rookery, and then the need felt by the community to establish Park House in the 70s, this is part of the gradual evolution of things. Standards change, needs change. We have to put our weight behind it and see what we can achieve for the community.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Daly, then Councillor Bennett.
Chairman, I'd like to welcome this. I think it's a very good initiative by the staff, and I praise them for doing so. Really? Don't need to drop your jaw.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
There is one...
Are you stopping there?
No, there's one little suggestion I'd like to make, possibly. I don't know whether you've already thought of it, but there'll be some staff accommodation built into this.
So, I mean, in the scoping, we've considered that. It's in the scoping ideas, but whether that's actually affordable or whether that be actually pleasant for staff is another issue.
Should be on. Right, sorry about that. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman. I, like others, really welcome this, and in fact, going back in history, about 20 years ago, the Community Health Council were closely in touch with a place in Northern Ireland where health and social care had been successfully integrated that long ago. But this report, to me, apart from the very positive aspects of it, the one reason where such schemes have faltered before is on the funding. And it's the funding of services rather than the capital funding where there's been confusion and a lack of willingness for the two services, NHS and social care, to combine forces. And that is what we've got to guard against. And this report doesn't really separate revenue and capital. And I think that's something we do need to address. It's the service at the end of the day that's important, and the funding of that service that needs to be very clear. Anybody can put up buildings and so on.
You're absolutely right. It's the ongoing revenue. And I think that's the thing, because obviously for the health service, the hospital's expensive, whatever that means for the health service, and Park House is expensive to us. So there is a willingness on both sides to think, if we bring those two pots of money together, surely there must be some shared resources we can do here, surely in terms of catering, laundry, you know, all sorts of things that you could combine, maintenance. So there must be some way of this kind of stacking up. And the hospital isn't full to capacity all the time. All the time. Really careful.
Councillor Daly.
Just a suggestion what we found on St Martin's when we tried to put up a combined emergency centre, fire station, ambulance, etc. The accountants were saying, who owns this building? Who's going to pay the maintenance on it? Who's going to pay the insurance? Those are the sort of things you need our financial staff to probably help you with.
Definitely.
Yes, it's all down to money. Right, it's a very simple recommendation. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say I'll propose.
Yeah, it's on page 1. Thank you. Councillor Martin proposes the recommendation. Seconding Councillor Billsborough. All those in favour? Anyone against? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Right, we now roll of drums. Housing report. Not going to rain on your parade, but I'm just going to say we had a very good look round, 5 of us, the Wellcross development, and everyone who went was pretty much overwhelmed by just how attractive and surprisingly spacious the 2 granite and timber-clad bungalows looked, and we're all keen to see it get as occupied as soon as possible. And we all wanted really to heap praise on the builders, Quicks, the designers, Truins, and the developers, Cornwall Rural Housing, for getting this saga, this 10-year saga, to a close. That's my piece, Ian. Lots of new things to talk about. What do you want to tell us?
Well, I won't do 2.1, you've done that one already. 2.2, we are progressing to demolish the school site, and we're also progressing a scheme to be submitted to the HCA. We're going to have a conversation with them, as they call it, just to see whether they're prepared to back up their previous support for the scheme, where they said that demolition will obviously bring down the costs, which makes it better value for money, and also give us more accurate assessment of building costs. So we need to find out from them whether they still want to proceed with that. We'll find that out probably in the next few days, I would hope. Knowing the HCA, though, they may give us a sort of smoke screen to start with.
Could I just butt in there just to say, look, Councillor Bennett's noticed that it does say exempt information across this particular, or at least certainly my copy of the report. It shouldn't. It's not exempt. It's to be taken in part 1.
Yeah. Sorry, you've thrown me now.
Yep, thrown you.
You have completely thrown me on that one, so I was on a roll.
You're on a roll.
I was on a roll on
You're
that
on a roll,
one.
can't Thomas?
So maybe I should go back to Wellcross and then start.
Yeah, do that.
No. But we are hoping, as I said, to find out whether we can get some funding for it, or at least know where we stand, to see whether we need to maybe divide the site up in terms of tenures so we can attract alternative funding for it. But we're also looking maybe that there might be a source internally to hopefully push this one ahead. So that's on the Khan Thomas one. There is a slight difficulty, if I just sort of elaborate on that, because the government at the moment are not pushing affordable housing, so we need to be quite quick at the present time because they're really pushing towards home ownership and they're stacking everything on the home ownership less 20% of market value. So a lot of housing associations are actually not becoming, as I would call them, housing associations, they're becoming private developers. And there's also another thing that at the present time, I mean, the government haven't come out with a clear thing on it, but it's the right to buy. I know that the local MP has sort of supported that the right to buy being extended to housing associations may not apply here. But of course that's been said but not been proven yet in any documents. And another thing with the right to buy, the National Housing Federation have done a deal with the government so that it comes in on a voluntary basis. I'm not sure exactly what the voluntary basis is, but it also means that housing associations don't need to discuss with local authorities about their nomination rights, so they can let whoever they wish. I'm not saying it's going to happen over here, but you need to be aware of that. And also there's still this thing about selling off of council properties that are of high value to match this. So in the next few months or few weeks, there's going to be a lot coming out from this that could make a big change on the housing front. So you need to be aware of that. But at the moment, it hasn't there. There is unlike on Well Cross, there is a window opening. Hasn't been nailed shut at the present time, and we're trying to see whether we can still get some money from that. But even, as I said before, even if that doesn't happen, I think we've got other things that we might be able to bring forward that might make the scheme successful. And then hopefully from that, we'll have another, what they call master plan, with other sites that will come in from the Duchy, so that we can go to the HCA with sites there that one will, if you like, cross-subsidise another. And that also depends on the local plan coming through, and also maybe changing the local plan that might allow some home ownership initiatives that allow less cross-subsidy. The other one, sorry, I've done that. The other one is Chymore, where we've obviously purchased that property, as we said previously, with some of the proceeds from the sale of 6 Sallyport. So that's been complete and occupied. Major schemes, the refurbishment of Port Cressa is 98% finished. There's some minor bits and pieces that need to be completed on there. If anybody hasn't been there, I suggest you do go and see it. If you can remember what it looked like, it's a completely different scheme now to what it was. In fact, to the point where one of the tenants was thinking of moving to Wellcross, but has decided not to move to Wellcross because it's so nice there now. We're looking at, and I just wanted to reiterate the fact that it wouldn't have been that successful if we didn't have a really good contractor and the residents really fully supportive of it. Yeah. They've been excellent. You know, you can't do schemes like this with the amount of work in there without their goodwill, to be said. We're looking at museum flats to do a similar sort of scheme there. I won't go into it, but it's not quite as easy. In terms of, obviously, there's more leaseholders there, so when you do improvements, it's down to the leaseholders approving that, so you can't do it, as you say, we may own the freehold, you can't do it carte blanche without their approval. So if there's something within the scheme that they're not happy with, then obviously we can't proceed with that. But we are looking at improving that one. And we're looking at long grass, and we're looking at some reinstatement of external redecoration programme. And that's basically it. So if there's any questions you want to ask on that, then please feel free to do so.
Yes, there's also that important refurbishment work, I think, that's going to be done up at the Strand, isn't it? And then up on...
Well, that's basically external redecoration, so that when they do that, they do repairs and that.
Yeah, that will be good too. Right, are there any questions? Councillor Daly.
Chairman, on the local television, BBC television this morning, there was news of a house building fund of about £1 billion, of which only a small fraction have been used. Is there any hope of getting any money from that?
I'm not aware of what fund that is, but sometimes these funds are restricted, if you like, to developments over a certain amount. So there's been lots of funding for schemes that are of 200 or more, or 50 or more. So sometimes we can't compete with that because we haven't got schemes that will go in at that size. So without knowing exactly what that initiative is, I couldn't really comment on it. But most of them are actually home ownership. And if you look at most of the government things that are coming at the moment, home ownership, home ownership, home ownership, and affordable isn't there, which personally means it starts to exclude because people just don't have the income, even with a 20% discount. But that discount only lasts for a limited amount of time, so it's not forever.
Councillor?
Regarding what the MP said, because there was certainly myself, Gordon and Abel in the room at the club, we talked specifically about the right to buy. And what he said was, it didn't have it in writing. What's the housing minister called? They all look the same to me. Is it Greg Clark?
Greg Clark. Yeah.
Greg Clark. He said that there were a number of South-Western MPs in the room. They were all asking for exemptions, and he basically said, no, except when Mr. Thomas asked, and the minister seemed to be very, very clear that we would get an exemption. However, he did say it's not in writing. So I think what I'm doing, I'm just basically putting it up in the ante really for the MP to push it forward. But he definitely said that to us. I think that was the case, wasn't it? Yeah. So I think that's quite positive. And also regarding progressive flats, I think the transformation has just been staggering. And when it actually does demonstrate you can put lipstick on a pig, because they look absolutely wonderful now, those flats. And before they were, well, there's a number of other places they would have fitted much more appropriately to Paul Cressida. So well done for everybody with that.
Thank you, Steve. Any other comments? Okay, there's a recommendation on page 31. It was Councillor Bennett just beat you. You can second this one, Councillor Bilsborough. All those in favour? Right, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. We now move on to item 9, energy efficiency.
Thank you very much. This is to make members aware of an opportunity that we're looking to progress, which is about funding towards energy efficiency in social housing. It might also cover public buildings, but we've got no visibility on that yet, but it will definitely be available for social housing. We have 108 of our own stock of social housing. There are 63 other houses which belong to housing associations. Potentially we could get a grant up to 80% for a range of things which won't be bog standard things like loft insulation or those kinds of things, but will cover things like smart heating controls, smart heating systems, energy storage, electric vehicle charging and renewables as part of the building, and air source heat pumps, for example. And that would make our homes greener, warmer, more controllable, less expensive for people to run. So we're asking permission from members to start progressing this bid when the call comes out, so that we can make this an option for the Isles of Scilly and for our own housing stock.
Councillor Bennett.
Chairman, I think it's a wonderful opportunity and project. Is the Duchy involved too? As a social housing register, isn't it?
We've talked to DCLG, and they've gone away for advice on whether the Duchy housing that counts as 106 can be counted as social housing, because in many ways they've got some of the harder to reach properties, in that they are most difficult to heat and keep warm because of their construction. So we're waiting for guidance from DCLG at the moment.
Councillor Bilsborough.
Chairman, on page 5, it says, talking about transport near the bottom, 40% of vehicles on the island being electric. I presume this is an aim. I think we ought to really get our heads around this. I'm not arguing for or against electric vehicles. I'm just arguing, if you've got electric vehicles, they need charging from time to time. And a large number of the vehicles on the island, especially cars are parked in the street, which means in order to charge them, you have to drape electric wire across the pavement. Has this been taken into account?
I think you'll find it has, but...
This is
Pray
not.
tell me.
This is not the subject of this particular bid, but there will be a further bid in the future, if members agree, for electric charging vehicle points on the islands. So that's part of another progression of another bid, which will be going to a different committee than this particular.
So the idea, I think, will be to have communal charging points.
And-
Is that right?
Yes, and although electric vehicle in certain houses in our social housing stock could have electric vehicle charging points in their homes as part of this funding, if appropriate. But this project is just about energy efficiency in homes. It's not about electric vehicles. That's the overall Smart Island vision that members looked at in the summer.
I understand that, but I still take issue with this 40% of people being able to charge them. There's no way it can all be charged by having electric points around the island. People will bring their car home at night, will want to charge it, and they will not be able to if they've got to drape a wire across a pavement. I think it's pie in the sky, Chairman. It's not been thought through.
Gordon, I think you find... I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just,
sorry.
can Diana answer that, and then you, Councillor Sims. Yeah.
I was just going to say, this isn't this project. This project's about energy efficiency in social housing. This is about making our housing stock warmer, drier, cheaper for people to run. That may or may not include electric vehicle charging points. Many of our properties won't be acceptable for electric vehicle charging points. The target for electric vehicles is part of the overall vision and is not addressed by this project. This project is just about social housing.
Yes. You can go into battle on that again later, I think, Councillor Bills. Councillor Sims.
It's in Teddy next week. We're actually discussing that. But I was just really... It takes about... If you've got the points, it takes about half hour to charge them with these points. And the other thing, which is very, very important, if these things are provided, people are entirely at their liberty to completely ignore them. So it's... I think I don't think it's an issue, but it is coming up next week in Teddy.
So all I can say is, yes, I understand that, but in order to get an electric vehicle, and I'm harping on this, well I am, people will have to buy a fairly new vehicle, and they're not cheap, whereas they can buy an old second-hand car for next to nothing. So getting an electric vehicle is expensive, and then when the batteries get worn out, it costs thousands to replace them.
We're not trying to force people to make changes in their lives at all, Gordon. We would never try and force people to use electric vehicles. We just want people to have the opportunities that they have on the mainland to have a cheaper form of transport.
Right.
I just wanted to raise the single issue of smart meters, because I've been reading quite a number of articles which suggest that the only benefit of smart meters is to the supplier.
It's for the company.
And that unless the supplier passes the savings on, which most of us think are fairly unlikely, it's not really viable.
Thank you.
Smart meters are actually part of a much bigger project that we're looking at separately from energy efficiency in housing, where actually the benefit would go back to our householders on the islands. We're looking at a much larger suite of projects which, with other partners, not just ourselves, which looks at those things with the possibility of an energy enterprise for the Isles of Scilly separate from the main providers.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Just quickly, I did discuss, we talked about this with Diana yesterday, and at some point in the not too distant future, there's going to be a member workshop on smart energy again.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. Yes, I just wanted to mention the one minor reservation that I had when this came up to the housing partnership earlier this week. And it is a question, of course, there is an 80% intervention rate, so we would have to find some money. And we just need to be careful that because it's exciting and because it's, you know, progressive, we might end up having to pay quite a chunk ourselves. We have got reserves in the housing, but on the other hand, that's committed to other. No, as the original part author of the Sustainable Energy Strategy, can I ask members round to recommend, to endorse the recommendation on page 5? Sorry, we haven't had a proposer was Councillor. I don't think we had a seconder. Let's assume that it's Councillor Bennett. All those in favour? Brilliant. Thank you very much. Nobody against? Good. Right. That's carried. Thank you very much, Diana. So that concludes part 1 business. Item 10 is for information only, but I would just commend members to read through the local account. You'll recall that we dealt with this in July. It has been tidied up. And I think, Clive, this is something that, you know, I think would welcome you to read as well. The one question I would have asked Gareth if he'd been here, this is meant to go out to the community, and we do need to sort of make sure, because they are meant to sort of participate in we want feedback. This is what the department has done last financial year, so we want the public to actually say, oh, that's brilliant, oh, that doesn't work very well, why don't you do it this way, kind of thing. So it is a part of a two-way process.
Well, maybe I could ask Vice Chairman, if I gave you a few copies when you start doing your roadshows around the islands, might be good to hand that out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would help. Okay, and the other thing I'm going to do before you leave, some of you may not have seen this copy. It went round in what I'm reliably informed is called Satchel Post through the school. It's called In the Loop, and it sums up everything that's happening in the library, lifelong learning, various other bits and pieces within service delivery. It's only in sort of fairly slim kind of pamphlet form, but there are copies available at the town hall. But I was surprised I hadn't seen it until quite recently. This is the autumn version of it, so I'd quite like you to walk away with a copy of this, so you can have a look at it and say, oh yes, I didn't know about that. And maybe, can you circulate those? Yes. Brilliant. Okay, right. We're now going to move on to part 3 with reports containing exempt information under section 100A of the Local Government Act of 1972. I move that the public be excluded from the following item of business because it may involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in that Act pertaining to the identification of particular individuals. Can I have a proposer for that? Councillor Billsborough, seconded. Councillor Bennett. All those in favour? Fine. Nobody against? Good. The video record